Well, welcome everyone to the Monday, April 4th, 2022 meeting of the Human Services Committee.
Recording in progress.
We have a quorum, so we will get started. And our first item of business is approval of the minutes of our last meeting. Would someone like to make a motion? Committee members? We're approving the minutes of our last meeting.
Yeah, I move approval of the minutes from, March 7th? Yep.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, and then I believe, would everyone in favor please say aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, so we have the minutes of our last regular meeting approved. And now we're ready for some public comment. We'll start with the folks who are here. Tony Schlacks.
Thank you. My name's Tony Schlacks. I'll try not to speak too loud tonight. Pun intended. I just wanted to make sure that everyone has read the revised proposal in depth, and to point out one key observation, which is that under Clause 5, if an organization or business has a special event permit, they're excluded from having to abide by this ordinance except for the time of morning or night, which would exclude the loudest event during the year, which are the space concerts out at Canal Shores. And I assume they have not requested that special permit yet for this year, although they did start selling tickets for the events from August 4th through 7th at Canal Shores last week. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Tony. And they have applied for and been granted the special event permit.
By the City Council?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, which?
We approved a whole set of special event permit applicants a month or two ago.
Okay, I'll check that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Barbara Wallace. Hi.
I'm Barbara Wallace, and I'm speaking for myself and my spouse, Tom Wolf, and we live at 1617 Lee Street in Evanston. We support the proposed changes to the sound ordinance. We live across from the Crown Athletic Fields, and we know how much noise can carry across an open area, so we're sympathetic to the residents on Asbury. And we feel that the changes adequately address the situation with the American Legion. We aren't sure that the changes address our concerns at the Crown Athletic Fields and want to be sure that the sound ordinance applies to all residential neighborhoods. We want to take the opportunity to highlight the concerns we have and to make sure we're covered by any changes in the ordinance. We want to preface this by saying that we support public use of the fields. We love them, and we appreciate the benefit they provide, especially to young people in Evanston and especially during the pandemic. But some of the houses are less than 100 feet from the fields, and there's nothing between us and the fields, no buildings, no landscaping. And many days when the leagues of all sorts use the field, the decibel level is above the ordinance limit with Bluetooth speakers, coaches yelling, whistles, whatever. And most of the time that activity is welcome. It reminds us that we live in a vibrant community. When the Washington kindergartners are playing tag and screaming, it's our favorite time of the day. But other times, many of us would like a break from the noise. We've been told to call the staff at the Crown Center when it's open if speakers are on the field, and we do that. But we don't want to encourage conflict between the staff and the people who use the field. When the old Crown Center was there weren't lights and no fields were this close to homes. To that end, some of us have recommended using the lights less to reduce the number of people with curb noise without anyone having to resort to noise complaints to the Crown Center. We've asked for the lights to go off at 9 p.m. and have asked for maybe one regular night with no lights. A night or two a week that neighbors could know ahead of time would be a quiet night. Some of the nights, the lights are on until 11 p.m. With our neighbor Alex Schiffer, we surveyed 37 homes near the field, and 30 supported this idea, some because of the sound and some because they find the busyness or the lights intrusive. We've suggested sound abatement technologies, including soundproof fencing or landscaping, and finally, better signage. Bluetooth speakers are everywhere now, and they work really, really well, and they carry really well. They aren't allowed on the field, but the signage is very poor for that. It's very small, and people don't see it, and a simple solution would be larger and simpler and better signage. Because that would reduce any friction between the staff at Crown Center and the people who use the field. Again, we support the public spaces, including the Crown Fields. We just want to break from the noise sometime, and we want this to happen with the help of the city so it doesn't cause friction between individuals or extra work for the Crown staff. Thanks for your time and for working so hard to make Evanston a nice place to live.
Oh, thank you for bringing that to our attention. We will see what we can do. I'm just making a little note to myself. Okay, then online, just a minute. Chris Dillow?
Hi, yes, can you hear me?
Yep.
Great, thank you. So I just want to take the time, thank you for the Human Services Committee for taking the time for public comment. I am imploring this committee to consider the human impact of concentrating a large number of vulnerable individuals at one location at the Margarita Inn in the 4th Ward. I do not believe that the city or this committee can quantify the impact financially or in required services resulting in this concentration of individuals. There are so many studies and examples, even right here in Evanston, proving that concentrating a vulnerable population is a failed approach, be it homelessness or other populations that require acute resources. Connections for the Homeless failed horrifically at the Orrington and are failing the residents and their neighbors at the Margarita Inn right now, not because of bad intent, but because they continue attempting to implement a failed model. By applying as a rooming house, and the city ruling that they meet that designation is a disingenuous way for Connections for the Homeless to advocate its responsibilities to carry out best practices with measures and oversight that ensure the safety and protection of all concerned. Best practices that would include not housing large numbers of homeless, vulnerable individuals together without serious, substantial professional supports on hand around the clock. The safety and well-being of residents of a shelter and the safety and well-being of the surrounding neighborhood are not part and parcel to each other. One is not exclusive to the other. Again, we hope this body will demand information on how many police, EMS, and medical and mental services will be required, what Connections will do to support it, and how the city of Evanston will make up the difference and help the broader council do its job to make the best decision for the 4th Ward and the city of Evanston. Thanks again. Appreciate your time.
Oh, thank you. And this committee actually is not the body that's going to be discussing the Margarita Inn issue. That there'll be a zoning board of appeal or a land use commission meeting, and then it'll go to the planning and development committee.
Oh, no, I totally get that. But as the Human Services Committee, obviously you guys have an agenda, right? And so that is the thinking of bringing this particular aspect of this to this board in the hopes that you can influence the larger board.
Okay, thank you. And then Nancy Baker?
Hello, just making sure you can hear me.
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you in advance for this opportunity. I am a 38-year resident of Evanston in the 4th Ward. And I also, along with Chris, wanted to talk about this issue. The residents of the 4th Ward who questioned the initiative of Connections establishing a rooming house by the Margarita Inn have been called NIMBYs, out of touch and unsympathetic, but instead it is Connections, we believe, that needs to cultivate more compassion. Why would Connections choose to operate a facility and call it a rooming house rather than the more accurate homeless shelter or supportive housing? If our nation's homeless suffer from the trimorbidity of mental illness, medical illness, and addiction at a rate of 86% and need extensive monitoring, treatment, and care, why would Connections promise to only give them a temporary shelter in a rooming house? Connections seeks an operating agreement which is largely funded by the taxpayers, both local and federal, that allows them to provide fewer services with less oversight and fewer regulations. If Connections plans to have an effective 24-hour trained staff, wraparound services, meals, healthcare, therapy, job training, then it should apply for the proper, more regulated permitting for that property and not the quick rooming house application, which offers little more than heads in beds. In the months that they have operated the Marguerite Inn, they have failed their charges miserably. There have been over 60 911 calls in less than 52 weeks. Fires, overdoses, a death, fights, violent threats, children left unattended, and vandalism, the list goes on. And several of those calls were horribly from other residents inside the Margarita Inn. So when you ask Connections how in the future the neighborhood should best deal with these emergencies, you were told simply call the police. Through their irresponsible, hands-off design, Connections practices are in effect criminalizing the vulnerable, the mentally illness, and the addicted. You don't like the drunk gentleman in the rose garden? Call the police. You have a problem with Connections and the residents trying to break in your back door? Call the police. The guy's having a fight in the middle of Oak Avenue in the middle of the night? Call the police. Long-time housing advocates, such as Connections, are resting on a dogmatic approach, outdated principles that are not grounded in fact, which include fact. The entire United States now understands it is never a good idea to stockpile vulnerable people, but rather create careful, selected, scattered sites. Fact, wraparound services provided by trained professionals are the only way to help the homeless long term. And fact, Connections and its get them in the shelter and let the city and residents deal with it later is not a sustainable model for vulnerable persons, the persons they profess to serve. So I respectfully request this board to hopefully influence the city to re-examine this site permit and Connections practices and approaches overall. Thank you.
Thank you. So does anyone else here tonight want to make any public comment? All right, then we're ready to go on with our agenda. Would someone make a motion for HS1 regarding City Code 9-5-20? And is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Excuse me. I'm just going to review what the various changes are. So as you know, so the first paragraph would be completely deleted from this section because the reasonable person standard is really very subjective and difficult to enforce. Moving on then to the more substantive part of the changes. So section F2, music and amplified sound. It regulates the sound level rather than the location of the loudspeakers. And it says that the sound that reaches a person 750 feet away from the amplifier or loudspeaker should be no louder than 55 decibels. At our last meeting, the language talked about an average conversation level, and it was determined that having a decibel limit would be easier to enforce. So there are a lot of examples of what a conversational level is. They range around 60 dBs, and so the proposal before you tonight is for 55 dBs. Then section F4, permit required. It provides that if you are going to use an amplifier or a loudspeaker outdoors, you must obtain a loudspeaker permit. And the permit, and it also provides that a permit shall not be issued for a loudspeaker that's located within 150 feet of a residence. And this continues to provide the protection for residents whose neighbors might want to use a loudspeaker close to their homes. That's a problem in some of our neighborhoods. So together, subsection F2 and F4 continue to disallow loudspeakers within 150 feet of a residence, but they do allow loudspeakers further than 150 feet as long as the sound level does not exceed 55 dBs at a distance of 750 feet. This is all a little complicated. Section F5 is exemptions. The first sentence exempts organizations that have obtained a special event permit that's been approved by the city council. It exempts them from the section about the decibel limit. And for example, as Tony Schlacks pointed out, that would allow the space concerts to continue. There is a correction that's needed to that sentence, though. We should strike it says that they're exempt from both F2 and F4. They should be exempt only from F2. They would still be required to get a loudspeaker permit. So when I get finished here, I'll make a motion to amend that to strike F4. And then in the second sentence is added since our last meeting, and that's to, there was a concern expressed at our last meeting about some unintended consequences, thinking, for example, of how these changes might affect Evanston High School and their football games. So the language that's been added would exempt educational institutions from sections F2 and F4, and that would cover, for example, Northwestern football games and ETHS football games. Neither Northwestern nor ETHS are currently required to obtain any permits for their loudspeakers, so this basically maintains the status quo. So can I open it up for any questions or comments from committee members? Councilmember Burns.
Whether we pass this today or not, I would request a demonstration, because this is all in the abstract right now, but I would love, with our police department to work with either the Canal Shores or Northwestern or someone with some loudspeakers. Maybe some of the council members have some loudspeakers at their house that we can use as an example, but this is very abstract, and so I want to make sure I understand, one, how it's going to be enforced by our Evanston Police Department and what 55 decibels really is at that distance. So again, I'm fine supporting this, but I would request
So when you say a demonstration would, like with a sound meter and showing what it would take to get to 55 dBs, or what?
Something. Just I need to see what this looks like in real time, and know that we have the equipment and our police department who enforce our noise ordinance understand exactly how to enforce this.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, if they have any thoughts on that, I don't know if we've ever done anything like that before, but that's something that I would want to make sure we do. Because again, one of my concerns during the last meeting was how does the reader know the difference between the cars rushing by a street and the noise that's in the background? How is it able to distinguish between each noise and like filter out one, but measure the other? I just need to see how this works in real time.
Right.
But happy to support it. I just want to
Sure.
understand how it works.
Yeah. I
Because
guess,
presumably we'll have people challenge it, and that's the next thing is somebody
Right, yeah.
challenges it. And then
well,
what
maybe
happens?
Chief Eddington would like to give us his thoughts. I mean, my thought would be that EPD would have a handful of actual sound meters, so we're not relying on people's iPhone sound meters. And so if there was a complaint, the officer would go to the location where the complaint was made, i.e. the residence 750 feet away, and whip out the sound meter and see just what the sound reading was, and take steps from there. Chief Eddington, you want to comment?
Thank you, Chairperson. Yes, we'll be happy to do this. Once the ordinance is on its way, we'll start to collect the equipment we need, because I think one of the other nuanced things is we probably need to have is a range finder, so we accurately say, yep, 750. And so that with the sound meter, and we'd be happy to demo that for you, sir, when we collect all that equipment.
Perfect. Thank you. Thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
And I think the other thing that will help is, since anyone who's going to be using a loudspeaker needs to get the loudspeaker permit. And then I think if the permit, when a permit is granted, if a copy goes to EPD, they'll know that there might be a complaint on a particular night because the permit's issued. So it will be, they won't have to just sit there every night with their sound meters waiting to be called. Are there any other questions or comments? Okay, then I'd like to just make a motion to amend the, it's going to be on page 8 of your packet. So where it says 5 exemptions, and at the end of the first sentence, we would strike F4. So it would read, organizations, businesses, or similar entities that have obtained a special event permit approved by the City Council are exempt from subsection F2 of this section, and we delete the F4. Okay.
Councilmember Ravel.
Yes. Oh, yes, I'm wondering who this light is. Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to be sure that in making that motion, so the way that it reads currently, and I think that the way that my department drafted it, is that the special event permit should encapsulize having loudspeakers, and that the permit that's in this code is like a separate and distinct permit. So in removing F4, are you requiring then that the entity that has a special event permit also get a loudspeaker permit?
The special event permit application requires a loudspeaker permit if they're going to use a loudspeaker.
Okay.
So it just,
So they should have to get 2 permits.
yes.
Okay, all right.
So could I have a second for that amendment?
I'm not sure chairs can move
Okay.
things, but you can second, but I'm happy to
Okay,
move.
if you'd move it, that would be
Yeah, I'm
great.
happy to move that amendment to, what is it, section 2,
Striking F4.
and number 5, striking F4. So it shall read, organizations, businesses, or similar entities that have obtained a special event permit approved by the City Council are exempt from subsection F2 of this section.
No,
Or is it
right.
F,
yeah,
right?
Right, no,
Yeah.
that's right. Mhm. I second that. So can we just do a voice vote? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. All right, and then now we're ready for the main motion as amended. All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
All right.
Opposed, no. I think we're done. Okay, then, now we're ready for items for communication, Evanston Police Department staffing vacancies and crime data updates.
Thank you, Chairperson. The members of the committee should have in their packet tonight a memorandum dated April 4th that deals with the vacancies. And also, it deals with the staffing levels over time in the number of officers and the crime levels as requested by Councilmember Reed at the last time we were here. I think there's some added additional explanations in there about how we've changed how we count crime over time, which are kind of really get into the weeds. But I think all those changes have leveled out with this being the 3rd year of the NIBR system, so we should account for any influxes in crime based on how we're counting. So that should be, we're comparing apples to apples for the last 3 years. And I will continue to provide this data as we go through, especially in the context of our staffing. Currently, the Evanston Police Department has 98 police officers. 44 of those 98 are Tier 2 pensioners, which means that their pensions are portable, as were the 24 officers that have left us for other organizations. So I think that's something we need to be mindful of as we go forward. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them.
Just
Committee, yeah, Councilmember Braithwaite.
Thank you, Alderman Ralph. So on the page I'm looking at, I'm just a little confused looking at the chart, and I know I didn't make this reference, but you did a great job like outlining the vacancies, but the grand total line in blue kind of confused me.
The grand total,
So
may
I
I
can
look?
show you. Thank you, Chief. So I wasn't sure. I saw that, but then I didn't understand what the grand total was equaling.
Nor do I.
Okay.
It's.
Not consistent with, okay.
Not consistent.
Okay, but I paid attention, so this is good. Thank you.
And any other questions or comments?
Do you,
Yep,
take
go.
it offline. Game tonight, we can take it offline.
I understand, sir.
Thank you.
Okay,
Straight up.
all right. Then I guess, do we need a motion to accept and place on file?
I move, Madam Chair, that we accept and put this very well-written report on file.
And is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no? All right, we've taken care of that one. And then HS2, there was a police complaint in our packet.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'm here to go over the complaint, which is DI 21-01. So a quick summary of the facts. On July 21st, 2021, officers responded to do an involuntary committal. The uncooperative patient was to be placed in a mental health facility, but could not be located. There was an officer that was accused when they talked to the mental health staffer using the wrong name, advised him of better ways to handle his job, and went as far as to say perhaps using an email in the future versus writing things down on a small piece of paper. It was also stated the accused officer made vague threats that the patient therefore was there was a lack of urgency and that the facility should do more for the patient care. In my words, I would summarize the accusations as a failure to provide adequate customer service. This was reviewed against the officer. It was not sustained by the patrol sergeant. Rules 1 and 20 were sustained by the patrol commander, the commander's recommendations, and the deputy chief concurred that the recommendations of sustaining Rule 1, violating Rules 1 and 20, with the shift level counseling to address the customer service issue was appropriate. This was then reviewed by the Citizen Police Review Commission. They found it to be complete, thorough, objective, and fair, and voted on March 2nd, 2022, by a 6-0 vote to move the complaint to Human Service Committee for review. Interim Chief of Police concurred with the Deputy Chief and the Commander, sustaining Rules 1, violating Rules 1 and 20 with shift level counseling. And that is the disposition. At this time, are there any questions I can answer about this department inquiry?
Committee? I think it's
Pretty straightforward.
pretty clear and straightforward, yes.
All right.
Okay, thank you
Very
very
good,
much.
thank you.
Thank you.
I do ask Commander Glue, and I think just the standard practice with these, was the complainant, and I looked at, were they notified that we would discuss this today, or that we brought this up in the past?
All CRs, people will receive a phone call, email, we'll reach out to them several ways. This complainant didn't want to lodge a complaint. They were fine with us going and investigating, OPS investigating as a DI. So the level of, we will always be available for follow-up, but that formal multiple layers of engagement
Got it.
is different, so.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yep.
Okay. So would someone like to make a motion to accept and place on file the report? Someone?
Madam Chair, I'd like to move.
Just a quick question.
Okay.
Does this describe what shift level counseling is in here?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Alderman Burns, so a shift level counseling would typically be something along these lines. A supervisor would sit down with the accused officer, the officer had the complaint sustained, and review the rule violations with them. And then give some direction and some counseling as how to correct the behavior. So such in this situation, we would potentially review the body worn camera, pick out areas that we thought were deficient, and provide ways not to do that again. That would then be documented. So if the problem persists, if there were other complaints or another issue came to our attention in a different way, then the corrective action would be more significant than the shift level counseling.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you. So now a motion to accept and place on file this review.
A motion.
Okay, is there a second? Committee,
Second.
thank you. Okay, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no? I mean, yeah. All right, so we have taken care of our agenda. Just before we adjourn, I want to note that it's come to my attention that the Environment Board is supposed to report to the Human Services Committee, which in my time on the Human Services Committee, they have never done, but they are very eager to come talk with us and share information about what the Environment Board's been doing. And so they will be coming to our meeting in early May. And I guess I'm just interested if you have any particular issues that you think the Environment Board has been dealing with that you'd like them to discuss when they come. Let me know sometime before next month, or if you have an idea tonight. So, okay, then would someone like to make a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second? Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you very much.